Welcome to the Grow Leap Academy podcast, where we explore smart strategies for a better life, one idea at a time. Today, we're diving into one of the most talked about books on behavior change, Atomic Habits by James Clear. We'll break down the core ideas, real life takeaways, and how you can actually apply them without needing a complete life overhaul. So grab your coffee, notebook, or just your attention, and let's jump in.
You ever think about what it takes to rebuild your whole life? I mean, like piece by piece after hitting absolute rock bottom.
Yeah.
That's what James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, went through.
Oh, wow.
It's a crazy story. I mean, we're talking broken nose, facial fractures. His vision was messed up for weeks.
Wow.
He was even put into a coma by the doctors.
No kidding.
But he came back from all that, and it really shows how small, consistent changes can add up to huge results over time.
That's incredible.
And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Right on.
We're going to do a deep dive into Atomic Habits,
Right.
focusing on some key sections to really understand the power of making small, manageable changes.
Sounds good.
So if you're not familiar with the book, Atomic Habits, it's all about getting just 1% better each day.
Okay.
And Clear's big thing is that systems are more important than goals.
Interesting.
He breaks down habits into this 4-part cycle: cue, craving, response, and reward.
Gotcha.
And from that, he comes up with his 4 laws of behavior change.
Makes sense.
You've probably heard of some of the other research in this area, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like B.F. Skinner's work on operant conditioning, or
Right.
Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit.
Yeah.
But what I find so fascinating about Clear's work is that he includes how we think and feel in the process.
Mm.
It's not just about what's happening around us,
Okay.
but also about how our thoughts and beliefs shape our actions.
I see.
It really feels like a whole new level of understanding habits.
That makes a lot of sense.
So let's start with the idea of small habits and why systems matter so much.
Okay. Sounds good.
When you hear 1% better each day, you might think, well, is that really going to make much of a difference?
Yeah. It's easy to dismiss those small changes.
Right. We're always looking for the quick fix.
Exactly.
We want to lose a ton of weight overnight or become a millionaire in a week.
Yeah.
We get so focused on those big, splashy goals.
For sure.
But Clear shows us that it's those small, consistent actions that add up over time. It's like compound interest, but for personal growth.
I like that analogy.
And that brings us to the idea of focusing on systems instead of goals.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of a basketball coach.
All right.
If the coach only cared about winning the championship but didn't bother with practice or drills,
Yeah.
well, how would the team ever improve?
I see your point.
It's not enough to just have the goal in mind.
Right.
You need the systems in place to actually reach it.
Makes sense.
Like that famous saying in football, the score takes care of itself.
Yeah, I've heard that.
If you want better results, you need to focus on building the right systems.
So it's about the process.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Now, he's not saying goals are useless. They give us direction,
Okay.
but it's the systems that actually get us there.
Gotcha.
And he points out a few problems with being too focused on goals.
Like what?
For one, winners and losers often have the same goals.
I haven't thought of it that way.
Think about the Olympics.
Okay.
Every athlete wants the gold medal. Or politicians, they all want to win the election.
That's true.
The goal itself doesn't guarantee success.
Right.
It's the training, the strategy, the systems that make the difference.
So it's about what you do every day to get there.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Another issue is that being too goal-oriented can actually make you unhappy.
Really?
It's like we tell ourselves, once I get this, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, I've done that.
But then we're always chasing that next thing.
Always looking ahead instead of enjoying the now.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Clear suggests that true long-term thinking is actually goalless thinking.
Goalless.
It's about committing to continuous improvement.
So it's about the journey, not the destination.
Exactly.
I like that.
Now let's talk about identity-based habits.
Okay.
Clear says there are 3 levels of change:
Right.
outcomes, processes, and identity.
I see.
Outcomes are what you want to achieve.
Okay.
Processes are the actions you take.
Gotcha.
And identity is what you believe about yourself. And he says that focusing on your identity is the most powerful way to change.
Why is that?
Because your habits are evidence of your identity.
Okay.
Like, he wasn't always a successful writer,
Really?
but he made it a habit to write 2 articles every week.
Wow, that's a lot.
And over time, the evidence added up.
I see.
He became a writer because he consistently acted like one.
So it's a feedback loop.
Yeah, your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits.
It's all connected.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful.
So instead of focusing on just losing weight, focus on becoming a healthy person.
Okay.
Or instead of wanting to write a novel, focus on becoming a writer.
It's a subtle but important shift.
Right, it's about who you want to be, not just what you want to achieve.
I get it.
Now, for actually building good habits and breaking bad ones, Clear lays out the 4 laws of behavior change.
All right, let's hear them.
To create good habits, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
Okay, that makes sense.
And to break bad habits, just do the opposite.
So make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
Exactly.
I like how simple and clear that is.
Right. It can be applied to almost anything.
For sure.
So let's start with the first law. Make it obvious.
Okay.
It all starts with awareness, recognizing the cues that trigger your habits.
Like what kind of cues?
He tells this story about a paramedic who could sense her father-in-law was having a heart attack just by looking at him.
Wow, how?
She couldn't even explain what cues she was picking up on.
Interesting.
But her experience had trained her brain to recognize the signs.
So she was unconsciously aware of the cues.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
The problem is that once a habit becomes automatic, we start noticing the cues.
So we're basically on autopilot.
And that's why it's so hard to change.
Makes sense.
So to become more aware, Clear recommends a couple of techniques.
What are they?
One is called pointing and calling, which they use in the Japanese railway system.
What's that?
The conductors have to point at things and say what they are doing. Things like signal clear or doors closing.
Okay.
It seems simple, but it forces them to be more conscious.
So it reduces mistakes.
Exactly. For our own habits, he recommends making a habits scorecard.
What's that?
Just write down all your daily habits and label them as good, bad, or neutral.
Okay.
It really helps you see your patterns.
I could see how that would be helpful.
So once you're more aware of your cues, you can start making the good ones more obvious.
Right.
And one way to do that is with implementation intentions.
What are those?
It's a specific plan for when and where you'll do something.
So it's like a pre-commitment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was this study where people who set implementation intentions were way more likely to exercise.
Wow.
Like 91% successful compared to the other groups.
Wow, that's impressive.
It works because it makes the cue more concrete.
So instead of just saying, I'll exercise more, you say, I'll exercise for 30 minutes at the gym at 5 p.m. on Monday.
Exactly.
Okay, that's specific.
Another technique is habit stacking.
What's that?
It's linking a new habit to an existing one.
So like, after I brush my teeth, I'll meditate for a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
I see how that could work.
It uses the cue from the old habit to trigger the new one.
Smart.
Now, your environment plays a big role in shaping your habits, too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Clear talks about the power of environment design.
Okay.
If you want to eat healthier, keep healthy snacks in sight and hide the junk food.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
So it's about making good habits easier and bad habits harder.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
He even says that the context itself can become a cue.
Like how?
If you always work on your couch, it can be hard to relax there later.
Because your brain associates it with work.
Exactly.
Interesting.
That's why starting new habits can be easier in a new environment.
Makes sense.
But be careful, because your environment can also trigger bad habits.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like those weight loss presentations that make people stressed and then they overeat.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Or showing smokers pictures of blackened lungs, which can make them more anxious and want to smoke.
So the attempt to discourage the bad habit actually reinforces it.
Yeah, bad habits can be self-reinforcing.
That's a good point.
So it's not enough to just rely on willpower.
You need to change your environment too.
Exactly.
That's really helpful.
All right, now for the second law. Make it attractive.
Okay.
This is about making your good habits more appealing, so you're more likely to stick with them.
How do you do that?
It has to do with dopamine, that feel-good chemical in your brain.
Okay.
For a long time, we thought dopamine was just about pleasure,
Yeah.
but now we know it's also about motivation and anticipation.
So we get a dopamine hit just thinking about something we enjoy.
Exactly.
That explains a lot.
So we need to find ways to make our good habits feel rewarding.
Makes sense.
Clear gives the example of the Polgar sisters, who were raised to be chess prodigies.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
Their father surrounded them with chess stuff.
So it became a normal part of their lives.
Exactly, and they were praised for being good at it.
So it's made attractive to them.
Yeah, and it shows how social influence shapes what we find attractive.
We want to do what our friends and family do.
Right, and also what people we admire do.
So we need to find ways to make our good habits feel socially rewarding too.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
One technique Claire suggests is temptation bundling.
What's that?
It's pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
Like watching your favorite show after finishing a work task.
Yeah, perfect example.
So you use the enjoyable thing as motivation for the less enjoyable thing.
Exactly.
See?
He also talks about the importance of reframing your habits.
Like how?
Instead of seeing exercise as a chore, see it as a way to boost your energy. Or instead of meditation being boring, see it as a chance to improve your focus.
So it's about changing your perspective.
Right, make it more appealing in your mind.
I see.
But there's a difference between motion and action.
What's the difference?
Motion is just planning and preparing.
Okay.
Action is actually doing the habit.
So it's easy to get caught up in planning and never actually do it.
Yeah, because it feels like progress without the risk of failure.
That's true. I've definitely been there.
But real change only happens when you take action.
Makes sense.
Now for the third law, make it easy.
Okay.
This is all about reducing the friction for good habits and increasing it for bad habits.
Like making healthy food more accessible and junk food harder to reach.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's about making the right choices easier.
He calls it the law of least effort.
Meaning we naturally gravitate towards the easiest option.
Right, and it's not just about our personal choices.
It applies to bigger things too.
He uses the example of how the shape of continents affected the spread of agriculture.
Interesting.
It was easier for crops to spread east-west across Eurasia than north-south across the Americas because of the different climates.
So the environment itself influenced human behavior.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
But back to our own lives, we need to make it easy to do the right thing. Prepare your workout clothes the night before.
Gotcha.
Pack healthy lunches in advance.
Makes sense.
Delete social media apps if you're trying to cut back.
Okay, those are all good ideas.
He also talks about decisive moments.
What are those?
Those small choices that set you up for success or failure later.
Like choosing a healthy restaurant over fast food.
Yeah, perfect example.
So those little choices can add up over time.
You really can't.
It's about setting yourself up for success.
And for starting new habits, there's the 2-minute rule.
What's that?
Make the habit so easy that it takes less than 2 minutes to do.
Okay.
Like read 1 page instead of read for an hour.
So the goal is just to get started.
Right, it's about mastering the art of showing up.
I like that.
Once you've established the habit, then you can start optimizing it.
So don't try to do too much too soon.
Exactly, standardize before you optimize.
Makes sense.
And don't forget about technology.
Right.
Use it to automate good habits like saving money or blocking distracting websites.
So it takes less willpower.
Exactly.
I love using technology to help me stay on track.
Me
It
too.
makes a huge difference.
Okay, ready for the fourth law?
Yeah, bring it on.
Make it satisfying.
All right, this sounds important.
This is all about making sure your good habits feel rewarding
Okay,
because we're more likely to repeat behaviors that we enjoy.
makes sense.
But the problem is that the rewards for good habits are often delayed.
While the rewards for bad habits are immediate.
Exactly.
Like eating a whole pizza feels good now, but the health consequences come later.
Yeah, our brains are wired to prioritize instant gratification.
That's why it's so hard to resist those temptations.
So we need to find ways to make good habits feel good right now.
Okay.
Clear suggests using reinforcement strategies.
Like rewarding yourself after completing a habit.
Right, but choose rewards that align with your goals.
So if your goal is to be healthy, don't reward yourself with junk food.
Exactly.
Maybe a healthy smoothie or a relaxing massage.
Yeah, something that reinforces your desired identity.
That's a good point.
He also talks about the never miss twice rule.
What's that?
It's about bouncing back quickly after slipping up.
So it's okay to miss a day, but don't miss 2 in a row.
Right, don't let a small setback turn into a complete derailment.
I like that. It's more forgiving.
And habit tracking can be really motivating.
How so?
Visually seeing your progress can make it feel more satisfying.
Like marking off days on a calendar.
Yeah, or using a habit tracking app.
I've found that those can be really helpful.
To make bad habits unsatisfying, he suggests using accountability partners or habit contracts.
So you have someone to hold you accountable.
Right, or you face a penalty if you don't stick to your plan.
That can definitely add some extra motivation.
It's about increasing the immediate cost of bad habits.
Makes sense.
Now, going beyond the 4 laws, Clear also has some advanced tips.
Like what?
One is to align your habits with your natural abilities and genetics.
Interesting.
He says genes predispose, but they don't predetermine.
So we're not completely limited by our genes.
Right, but it's easier to build habits around things you're naturally good at.
Because it's more enjoyable and you're more likely to succeed.
Exactly.
I like that. It's about playing to your strengths.
He also talks about the Goldilocks rule.
What's that?
It's about finding the sweet spot of challenge.
So not too easy, not too hard.
Right, about 4% beyond your current ability.
Okay.
That's where you're most likely to experience flow.
That feeling of being completely absorbed in what you're doing.
Exactly.
Love being in flow.
But even with the right level of challenge, boredom can still creep in.
Especially with habits, which can get repetitive.
Right, but that's where discipline comes in.
So it's about sticking with it, even when it's not exciting.
He quotes a weightlifting coach who says success comes down to who can handle the boredom of training.
That makes a lot of sense.
Professionals stick to the schedule, amateurs don't.
So consistency is key.
Absolutely.
I need to work on that.
And finally, he stresses the importance of reflection and review.
Like looking back on your progress and identifying areas for improvement.
Right. He compares it to the continuous betterment effort used by the LA Lakers.
It's about always striving to get better.
Yeah, even when you're already successful.
Makes sense.
But be careful, because even good habits can have a downside.
Really? How so?
When you become attached to a new identity, it can make you resistant to change.
Because you don't want to admit your weaknesses.
Exactly, but remember that growth is a continuous process.
So you need to stay humble and open to new ideas.
Exactly.
That's a great point.
So in the end, Clear reminds us that true satisfaction comes from taking action.
Not just from having desires.
Right, and that our actions reveal our true motivations.
So it's not what we say, but what we do.
Exactly.
That's a good reminder.
He also says that reward comes after sacrifice.
So you have to put in the work before you get the payoff.
Right, and that self-control is difficult because it's not immediately satisfying.
It's about delaying gratification.
Exactly.
Which is tough for most people.
He even has an equation for satisfaction. Liking minus wanting. So the more we want things, the less satisfied we are.
Because we're always chasing that next thing.
Exactly.
It's a powerful insight.
And finally, he reminds us that the pain of failure is relative to our expectations.
So if we have unrealistic expectations, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Exactly.
That's so true.
So to sum it all up, remember the power of small habits. Focus on building systems, cultivate your desired identity, and use the 4 laws of behavior change to make good habits stick.
Those are some great takeaways.
It's really about understanding how habits work so you can take control of your life.
I agree. It's empowering.
What's one small habit you think you could implement today?
I think I'll start with.
And if you're interested in learning more about how these principles apply to business or parenting,
Clear has some bonus chapters on those topics.
So that's it for our deep dive into atomic habits.
Thanks for the great discussion.
It was my pleasure, and thanks to everyone for listening.
We'll see you next time.